me say in all humility, it's all true. Thanks, Brad. Do a great job. Thanks for tackling a tough subject on impeachment. But none of us can compare with that introduction of your colleague, Jan Schakowsky. When Robin Gale stood up here and said, because of Jan Schakowsky, we have dates. Now, I've never used a dating service, but I want to thank you, Jan. Our two kids have very successfully, in your leadership, brought this to America. Thank you so much. It's what that's about. Tracy Catsmule, thank you. I will, Brad. You're now in a great position of leadership. Formerly great, still great in my books, Mike Kreloff. Thank you so much for all you've done. Tony Preckwinkle, when you came knocking on my door, and you do frequently, you're welcome to come anytime. And many years ago said, let's try to persuade a president named Barack Obama to create a waiver so that we can bring more people into health insurance in Cook County. We did it with Jan and Brad and everyone else. How many did it get up to? 120, 130,000? 130,000 people in Cook County for the first time. Pardon me?
318 now.
118?
318.
318. It might have been 400. 318,000 who now have health insurance, and I've met many of them. Some for the first time in their lives, the age of 60 and 62 years of age, have health insurance. Can you imagine living a whole life without health insurance? That is exactly what they've been through, and because of Tony's leadership and the great President Barack Obama, it became a reality. Now, I don't know if you can hear me in the back of the room, but I'm reminded of a trip I took. Kenya? Is that why you're leaving? No. I took a trip down to Nashville, Tennessee, to the Grand Ole Opry. You ever heard of that? Yeah. And there was a fellow there who was a country and western singer. He's kind of up in years, and he had a big old black cowboy hat and a guitar. He was leaning into the microphone. He said, you may have noticed that I'm wearing a hearing aid. I'm not. He said, you may have noticed I'm wearing a hearing aid. He said, I got it on my wedding anniversary. You may wonder why. Let me tell you. He said, my wife said to me, you know, I'm proud of you. And I said to her, you know, I'm getting tired of you too. He said, today I made a decision to buy a hearing aid, so I hope you can hear me whether it's assisted or otherwise. I want to thank all the people who are here and the many candidates in the room. Wish you all very well. And I just want to tell you that 2020 is a big year for a lot of big reasons. As Brad has told you, and you knew already, we are facing a moment in American history none of us could have imagined a few years ago. Today is the 1,000th day of the Trump presidency. The 1,000th day. And the reason I bring that up to you is at the end of this program, I'm going to ask you to remember that number, 1,000, because I have a request of you. But before I reach that point, I want to tell you why you need to be motivated and activated. You see it every day, don't you? In this president's conduct 5 times a day with his outrageous tweets, the things that he's done and said, continues to do. And you know what it's been? It's been that he's really confronted us across America and challenged us. He's challenging us as to whether or not we really stand for the values we profess to stand for. Are we willing to stand together for them? And in a way, it's a challenge we better take seriously. Because what this president has done and said is to go after the very basics. He has appealed to fear and hate across America. I hate to use those words. It's painful to use them, but there's no other way to say it. Appealing to fear and hate when it comes to the issue of race. Who in their right mind could go and look at that scene in Charlottesville and what happened when these new Nazis and white nationalists decided to march in the street, their chant straight out of the days of Hitler's Germany. And then the president to say afterwards, good people on both sides. Good people on both sides. What was he thinking? He wasn't thinking clearly. Because there weren't good people on both sides. There were good people on one side. On the other side were those who marched for hate and bigotry. And sadly, one of the other demonstrators lost her life because of it. That is the reality of his view, and I see it regularly. You know, on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is Mitch McConnell's favorite playground, where he sends us new federal nominees almost on a daily basis, I get to see these people with extraordinary, sometimes bizarre backgrounds who are being proposed for lifetime appointments to the federal bench. That's the #1 priority in the United States Senate. They passed 200 bills, Brad, 200 in the House of Representatives, the Democrats have, on every important topic that the people of Northfield, Illinois, and America care about, and we haven't taken up one of them, not one of them. Instead, we take up these federal judicial nominees. And to say that they are lacking in skill and competence is an understatement. Many of them never saw Perry Mason. Many of them never stuck around for the second half of Law and Order. They've never seen what a courtroom looks like. And now they want lifetime appointments to be trial court judges. I'm not making this up. Some of it is just downright embarrassing that they're being suggested for these lifetime appointments. But it's for one thing, to make sure when they get on the bench, they're going to overrule our efforts as Congress or the efforts of others to deal with the issues that are important. Issues like equality and opportunity. Taking a look at the issues when it comes to the side of women and their future in America. We know what this president has done when it comes to women's health care. We know when it comes to the most basic decision that women need to make about their future, he is closing door after door after door, and Republican governors are backing him up. Aren't we lucky to have J.B. Pritzker in the state of Illinois? Aren't we lucky to have him? And the decision by the Illinois General Assembly to enshrine in law the basic rights of women when it comes to health care. Thank goodness for that leadership and a turnaround in our state. Thank you all for supporting that important legislation. But that isn't the end of it by far. The battle which this president is waging on the issue of immigration is one that I take personally. Personally. If you visit my office in Washington, you're welcome. Behind me on the credenza, in a small 8x10 frame, is my mother's naturalization certificate. She came to the United States, brought here at the age of 2 from Lithuania, grew up in this country with a mother who never spoke English, made a life and a family, and got a son who ended up with a full-time government job. It's an indication of opportunity in this country for me, for my family, and for probably many others who are seated in this room who can tell a similar story. That's who we are in America. I just left the meeting in Schaumburg Township. There were about 200 people, demonstrators, outside that meeting protesting me. Protesting me. They were Indians, people from India, who have come to the United States on H-1B visas, who want to apply for green cards. There's a bill that's gone through the House, now before the Senate, which I think needs to be dramatically changed. It would start to solve their problem and offer them green cards by cutting off green cards for other people. We've got to find a better way. What I've suggested, what I voted for, is to increase the number of green cards so those who have talents and want to be part of America's future have that opportunity, whether they're from India or whether they're from Ireland. It makes no difference. They should all have that chance if they're a viable part of our future and our economy. And we need to work to do that. And what the president has done is to declare immigrants as murderers and rapists and terrorists. You've seen what's happened at the border. Maybe the most disgraceful chapter in the last 1,000 days. Boy, it's hard to think of that competition, isn't it? But the most disgraceful chapter in my mind was the decision of this administration to remove 2,880 infants, toddlers, and children from their mothers at the border. They did that. And then what did they do with them? They dispersed them across the United States without records. It wasn't until a judge in Southern California, a federal judge, demanded that they have an accounting of those 2,880 kids that they finally did. And all but 100 were finally reunited after months of effort. Let me tell you what it looked like. I went into an immigration court in the Loop in Chicago. You'd never pick it out. It's in a big, tall building. It's one floor. And when I got off the elevator, it was stacked 5 deep in the hallway, waiting for the docket call. The immigration judge was there, and she said, she seemed like a very nice person. She'd been at this for 20 years. She said, would you stay for the docket call, at least the beginning? I said I would. And I sat down, and she said, will everyone please take seats? Well, unfortunately, the first 2 clients had some difficulty. The first one, Marta, could not get in the chair because she was only 2 years old. She had to be lifted to get in that chair, and they handed her a stuffed owl that she hung on to for the entire hearing. But lucky for him, little Hamilton was 4 years old, and he was able to scramble up on the chair because they had a little car for him to play with on the table there. But here we are for the hearing on the fate of these children, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. This is America, where these children would be removed from their parents, and in this circumstance go through a hearing where they might wait, in this case, a continuance of 6 months before they were allowed to finally be reunited. I kept track of the 2-year-old. She was finally reunited 4 months later. She'd been separated from her mother for almost 8 months. They said when they first came together, she wouldn't even let her mother hold her. She felt like she'd been abandoned. That was the reality of what life was. And that was the policy of this administration. Now, there have been other terrible things, don't get me wrong. But this was a situation which clearly demonstrates what this administration feels like when it comes to the issues of immigration. We have work to do, my friends. A lot of work to do. And it isn't just on the matters I mentioned. We need to bring the issues home to people in a way that they care about them. Health care is number one. It won the big election for us in 2018 more than any other issue. Health care drove it because the Republicans virtually had no answer when it came to the Affordable Care Act. Nothing. And so we're in a situation where we need to address these issues in a meaningful way. And if you went across America and you asked the American people, what's the biggest issue in your life that you think Congress could do something about? Prescription drug prices, number one. Prescription drug prices. 90% of Democrats and 90% of Republicans all say the same thing. Prescription drug prices. Why would they say this? You have any friends or members of your family who are suffering from diabetes? Ask them about the cost of insulin. Let me give you one example. In 1999, Eli Lilly made a product called Humalog, a very popular form of insulin. It was for sale for $39 a vial in 1999. Now, $329 a vial for the same vial. I've met parents in this state who are hoarding insulin for fear that their kids won't be able to afford it. I'm not making that up. It's serious. Incidentally, how much is that same vial of Eli Lilly's drug selling for in Canada? Still $39. What's the difference? The difference is the Canadian government gives a damn. And the Canadian government says you're not going to overcharge Canadian citizens. Why doesn't our government? Why haven't we done this? The American people ask that, and rightfully so. We have to decide that the health of Americans is more important than the profits of pharma. I want them to be profitable. They're for-profit corporations. I want them to invest in new drugs. But when it comes to new drugs that are unaffordable and inaccessible, what do we gain? And in this case, we have to find a fair way to price those drugs. What's the second thing people mention that I'm concerned about that Congress ought to do something about? I don't know if you thought about it, but really it's something very important. People say, you know, I notice people are living a lot longer. I don't think I've saved enough money. I don't know if Social Security is going to carry me all the way to the finish line. What's going to happen to me, Senator? It's a good point. What we're finding is that more and more people are concerned about their retirement, the one that they signed up for, and whether it is going to be enough. Now, we have a plan through our Treasurer, Mike Frericks, in the state called Secure Choice, which I think some of the legislators here are aware of, creating opportunities for opt-in retirement plans for those who work for employers who don't already offer a retirement plan. But it's time for us to talk about those issues that are meaningful. Caregivers, for goodness sakes, don't we see it? An aging population. We want to make sure that people have decent, safe, respectable places to stay where we can send our mothers and grandmothers and others that we care for and feel confident that they're going to be treated well. Well, we've got to think about caregiving, but don't believe it's just at that end of life. When my son and his wife recently, I guess a little over a year ago, discovered they were going to have a baby and got so happy about it, the first call was to the daycare center to get on a waiting list so that their kids would be able to get into the daycare center near their home. It's caregiving from the very start of life all the way through life, and it ought to be viewed as something we care about as elected officials. The last point I want to make to you is one that goes in a little different direction. But we ought to think about this. Jeff Guerin's my pollster. I give him a lot of dough because I think he's pretty good. And he did an exit poll after the last election. And he asked those who voted supporting Hillary Clinton and those who voted supporting Donald Trump their views on issues. And a lot of these things were not surprising, just what you might expect. The two different camps would come up with. But the last question was the one that he said bothered him the most. Let me tell you what it was. Listen to it. Do you think expanding opportunity for women, for minorities, for those who are new to this country and people of different sexual orientation is good or bad for America? The line split. So you see, more than economics, we're dealing with some culture here. We know who we are. We know what Democrats stand for. We know what our values are, what they are worth fighting for. As long as I can remember, this has been a party willing to fight for equality and opportunity. We just lost a tremendous warrior in Marka Bristow. Marka Bristow, some of you I'm sure knew Marka, Jan and I think Brad as well, knew her as this wonderful champion for disabled people who worked so hard for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Just passed away recently. What a heartbreak. She was always, always there. One of her last official acts was getting arrested again in Washington and again. And we were so damn proud of her that she did. But think of it in our lifetime, how we've expanded this opportunity. We continue to work on the issue of race. We're not there by a long shot, but we made enough progress to elect an African-American president. We know that women are becoming a greater part of our political scene, and that's a positive thing. I want to give a shout out to Loretta's organization, I Will, because I know Deborah Shore is here, who was the first elected member of the I Will class. Tracy was in I Will. Who else was in I Will? Oh, look at this. A lot of I Will grads who are here.
Kim, where's Kim?
Pardon me?
Kim Dubois, where's Kim? There's a lot.
Okay, now we're going to have a... there have been 180 grads of Loretta's program over the last 15 years. And these are women who are now the first African-American lieutenant governor of our state, Juliana Stratton, Congresswoman Sherry Bustos, soon-to-be Congresswoman Betsy Dirksen-Lombrigan down in Springfield. Well, anyway, I made my point about women. There are a lot more that will make a big difference in our future. And we also know when it comes to sexual orientation, we have learned something as people and as a party, that the more people come to know those of different orientation, the more accepting they become. Our kids can't get it. Why are you still debating this? Why is this still an issue? They're people. Come on, get with it. And we have to be sensitive and conscious of the fact that our commitment to this cultural issue, this equality issue, may be divisive, but it is who we are. I think it unites us more than it divides us. And as we stand up for these principles, it makes a big difference. And let me close with 1,000 days. 1,000 days. Let me ask you, do you think during the course of those 1,000 days you maybe spent 1 hour a day watching Morning Joe, waiting for Rachel's voice so you can go to sleep, listening to NPR? So maybe you've spent 1,000 hours thinking about what a mess there is in Washington. And how many hours did you spend talking to your family and friends saying, what the hell are we going to do about this? We got to get rid of this guy. This has got to come to an end. I'm one who doesn't believe it'll be so simple as an impeachment and it's over. I don't think it's going to be that simple because I happen to serve in a Senate where I can count. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like a lot are moving in that direction. I could be wrong. We'll see. But we do know there's an election coming, and that's when we get the last word. So I'm asking for those 1,000 days and an hour a day that you give 1% of that back. Let's give 6 of those 10 hours back to family needs, the Illinois Democrats who are running at every single level. Many of them are here today. Mike Cavanargi is a new candidate who's going to be running countywide in Cook County, along with many others who are gathered here today. But then we need to devote some of our time to those battleground states, those electoral college states, which make the difference. We know what the electoral college is about. As archaic as it is, it's the Constitution, it's the law. We've had 2 presidents now who didn't win the popular vote and ended up guiding our country, appointing lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. So this election comes down to the very fundamentals and basics as to what we're going to be in the years to come. And I'm asking you to devote a few hours. Maybe it's just a check, maybe it's an Act Blue contribution, maybe it's some time that you could spend in Wisconsin, one of our battleground states, in Iowa, or places nearby. And if you're in deep southern Illinois, I know it's a long hike from here, but I do think there's a woman named Amy McGrath who is starting to get a lot of attention across this country. If you haven't heard her name, she's running the expensive town. So it's up to us. Are you prepared to spend another 1,000 hours watching MSNBC and complaining? I'm not. I'm ready to get out and do something about it. That's why you're here today. That's why the Northfield Township Democrats make a difference. Thank you.